So maybe first, if you could just tell a little bit about yourself and your family for those that don't know you at Crossroads.
Yeah. So I've been married for 19 years to Erica, and we have been in the Air Force together for quite a while. Right now, before even meeting Erica, I was in the military with the Marines and the Navy. So right now, I'm at like 27 years in uniform, 17 years active duty.
Hmm.
So it's getting pretty close to that retirement age, and who knows what God has for us after this. Um, my family is a lover of Crossroads. My kids are all part of the youth program and just really have embraced Crossroads youth and just enjoyed every moment they can, with that. We, you know, the Joshua has helped out with the sound and AV equipment there, and I know Abigail enjoys working with the nursery, and Noah just wherever. They enjoyed, I guess, over the weekend, helping out with the volunteering of packing lunches and so forth. So they just have a heart of service. We're
Yeah,
just really blessed to be a part of Crossroads.
yeah. Well, we're really blessed to have you guys as part of our family, and um, there was just a kindred connection as soon as you guys first started coming, and so thankful that God brought you here for this season. And I know that this last deployment kind of came as a shock, but maybe they all do. You were got your orders and you were out pretty quick. So maybe tell us about your most recent deployment and um, you know what was it like to get the orders? Where have you been? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a surprise because I thought, oh, I got 3 more years. I'll retire and not have to see another deployment. I didn't even think that there was a position out in Afghanistan for a lieutenant colonel, but there obviously was. And they opened it quite well. It's over at the headquarters in Kabul, Afghanistan, and that's where the old ISAF headquarters was, where they actually started the war in Afghanistan. So it's a very small base, about 2,000 plus there, literally less than a mile in radius or in a circumference rather. So it was pretty tiny. And to have, close to 2,000 people, you're stacked on top of one another. So it was really tight quarters, totally unexpected for us to get those kind of orders. But obviously, God had a purpose,
Mhm.
and nothing surprises the Lord.
Yeah,
And when we can understand that concept that God is in control and He has a purpose for us, then we can relax and say, okay, now what do you want us to do with you, Lord? And jump on board and watch Him do it. So
yeah.
it's kind
Well, we we have large part of our church family is military, and then the other part isn't. And so some people might not quite know what a chaplain does in the Air Force, but what does a chaplain do in Afghanistan? What's your role and what do you do there?
of, a chaplain is a pastor on the front lines. That's probably the best way to put it. Not only do you preach and you teach and you lead Bible studies, but you counsel quite a bit, especially troops that are really struggling with various needs and emotional distress, being their families. Sadly, we deal with a lot of the suicides or potential suicides that happen, and leading memorial services. Um, Once a month, we would lead a memorial service for each of the nations. One of the beautiful things about where I was deployed was it was a NATO billet, meaning that it was a NATO base. And so I got to serve with 42 different countries, um, from NATO as well as coalition forces. So it was a very unique dynamic where I was able to minister it to so many cross cultural, um, you know, uh, cultures and countries and nations. It was a blessing in that way. But that's very very unique. Um, Pastorally, of course, we had our very first baptisms in 18 years
Hmm.
at HQRS. You know, it was truly remarkable. I knew going in that God was drawing me to some individuals to witness to them and to lead them to Christ, but I realized that we didn't have a baptismal pool there. So, because we're such a small base, we didn't have the supplies to even build a baptismal pool. So I was like, submit it to the Lord, and next thing you know, there's the church that is sending me a baptismal pool with it was a hot tub, an inflatable hot. You know, I mean, I would have never thought about that. But I guess they had sent out some missionaries and had kind of used that out in the mission field. I'd never heard of that before, but now I have.
There you go.
That was just really special because I knew in advance that God was going to draw people to hear his name and proclaim his name. And sure enough, we had 6 people, accept Christ and want to be baptized. So that was a real holy moment, pastorally for me. Uh, so part of the responsibility too for a chaplain is advising leadership. That's a key role. And so my opportunity of being able to minister to a 4-star general is pretty significant, very strategic level. Um, when the Secretary of Defense was visiting, I got to pray with him and some other senior leaders. Um, you don't get to do that every day. So being
Hmm.
in a deployed setting, you do some pretty amazing things that you don't set out to do, but God seems to land them right into your lap.
Wow. Wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible. That is incredible.
pretty profound, ministry working um, in this kind of joint environment too, not just working with inter-service chaplains like with the Army chaplain or maybe a Navy chaplain, but getting a chance to work with uh, other country chaplains. So we had a Padre, British chaplain from the United Kingdom, and there's a German chaplain, a Danish chaplain that I was able to interface with. And so, yeah, it was truly remarkable to partner with all of these different pastors from different countries and to really make a difference, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Well, one body, one spirit, you know?
Absolutely. It was such a beautiful thing how, while we may speak different languages, we did have, the same language of Christ. And it was just truly remarkable how God just pulled all that together. But, it's really cool. One of the opportunities we had was um, putting together a worship service out in the HLZ, which is a helicopter landing zone. And, it's never been done before to have a church service out there on the landing zone of all places. But that was the only place that we had. It's a small base, but that was the largest open space that we had. And we were able to set, myself up and the praise team out on the bleachers, out on the HLZ, and everybody else is out there 10 feet apart, in their chairs with their masks on. And that alone was a God thing, making that happen. On the way to one of the services, I saw this Afghan who had actually been, worker at HQRS for about um, since 2002, I think it was. So quite a while. And like, hey, where you going? Because I was in a hurry to get to the service. I was like, oh, we're gonna have service out at the HLZ. We're gonna have some live music. Why don't you come? And kind of joking way, but not really. And he's like, yeah, I might check it out. So sure enough, I am, seeing the people come in with their masks on and everything. He brought three of his buddies, three of his other dance to our worship service outside, and I was just blown away that he would come to our Christian worship service. I mean, if you think about it, had COVID never happened, he probably would have never stepped foot in a chapel. But because it was in a neutral area outside in a totally, non-religious kind of environment, he felt more comfortable coming. So it's almost like God broke those barriers, was able to penetrate that one thing that would stop him from being able to hear the word. And we got little Bible sticks, in Dari, and was able to hand them out to some of the Afghans as well. So it's it's pretty powerful stuff, what God can do if we just have an obedient heart.
Yeah. So I understand you actually even performed a wedding, officiated a wedding while you were there.
Oh, yes. It was fascinating that I had been counseling this couple, and they were from the Army National Guard from New York, and they had been engaged for about a year and a half and wanted to, I guess, get married before they left, but their deployment happened so quickly that they couldn't make that happen. So once they got out to the deployed location, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so hard." Especially seeing each other every day, stuff like that. Then, of course, when COVID hit, they had the brilliant idea. Being from New York, they were able to get their marriage certificate online. Normally, they'd have to go to the courthouse, but because of COVID,
Hmm.
they kind of stripped a lot of the rules. And by golly, they were able to get a marriage license online approved. And so that gave me the opportunity then to hold a wedding in a war zone, the first time ever that it's been done. And so we had, it was a spectacular moment in time where we actually had like the Macedonians, they were throwing flowers, little petals instead of rice, as they're coming out the door, and the Georgians were hooting and hollering. The Brits, they had like this massive sign that said "Just Married." They had souped up this really cool, you know what a gator is? It's kind of like a
Hmm.
um, golf cart, souped up golf cart, and it has yeah, sirens on it, because it's a small base. You don't really need vehicles there. So we tied some danglies on the back of that and had a sign that said "Just Married," and we got them on the gator and driving them around with the sirens and all. Just really made a good about it. So it truly was neat to see a young couple wanting to get married under the eyes of God, you know,
Hmm.
and do it the right way. So yeah, I'll never I'll never forget that. That it's pretty cool.
Wow. Well, maybe more on a personal note, one of the challenges you had while you were away was that your mom lost her battle with cancer. And, if you're open to talking about that, I know that was a real struggle for you. You were able to come home for a little bit, and but then went back and she passed on, and then they had a funeral and stuff here while you were there. What has God taught you through that really difficult loss while you're away?
Well, it is fascinating that over the 27 years I've been in the service, I've done a lot of Red Cross messages. And, it finally hits home when um, it's yours and you have to respond to your own mother's, passing. I was very, very blessed that the Air Force gave me the opportunity to go home and visit mom before she did pass. It's probably one of the greatest gifts that I could really receive, you know, to be able to make it home, even if it was just for a few days. It was just a true blessing to see her and to love on her, pray with her, in her final days. Coming back and being a part of a memorial online is not the ideal for sure. And it was kind of tough because the internet really was horrible. And so I missed about 50% of, the memorial service because of that. So that was, yeah, that was, I would say, pretty difficult. But one of the things that I really took away is that his strength, or his grace is sufficient.
Mhm. Mhm.
God's grace is sufficient for me, and he really got me through that dark time. And I had the Lord provided me an amazing chaplain assistant who understood. His mom had passed a while ago, and he just had amazing compassion. And he gave me my space when I needed it. And yet he prayed with me too, which is not normal for a lot of chaplain assistants because you just never know what you're going to get. But he was a Christian, is a Christian, and loves the Lord, and just he himself could be a pastor too. Just he really pastored me through that time, and uh, God, God puts the right people at the right place at the right time when we need it most, and he, his grace is sufficient for us. It truly is.
Yeah. Well, how can we, as a church, pray for you and your family during this time?
Yeah, I think first of all, just the transition period. There's a lot of anxiety. Missing flights is a big deal.
Mhm.
That's a big deal. Making sure that I'm able to get there in time, and um, being able to get through that period. And then I think too, just the reunion part. Uh, as most employers know, when you come back, things have changed. Things are going to be different, and just pray that we all are able to work through those differences because uh, now, especially with COVID, things have changed in the United States. As they have here in Afghanistan, and just being able to be flexible and having a teachable spirit through, I think, those moments of change.
Mhm.
And I think finally too, as we begin to prepare hearts for the next chapter that God has for us, that we don't go begrudgingly, that we go trusting that this is the Lord's will. Because to be honest with you, we love it in in Virginia. We love it there at Crossroads. We love it, there in that area that we've made so many good friends, and we hate to leave.
Mhm.
That's always the hardest part about military. You develop so many great relationships, and then it's kind of like you get plucked out, and saying goodbye is tough.
Mhm.
So yeah, the church can be praying that we gracefully leave, and that God will plant in us the new spirit of hope in this new location, and that we'll see it from God's lens and not our lens. That would be
Yeah.
that'd be very special, you know.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think if there was. I mean, we can go. Obviously, we're going to edit all this stuff, but is there a story that you really wanted to tell? I can kind of lead into it. Is there a story that you really wanted to tell, a God moment that God did there that we haven't addressed that would be um, a great addition to the recording? If so, I can just prompt it with a question, or Paul can, and then you can share about it.
yeah, yeah. Well, whew, there's quite a few. There's quite a few moment stories. Um,
So maybe I should just ask you if there are probably some huge God moments while you were in Afghanistan. Maybe I'll just say it like that, and then you can answer the question. Does that sound good, Paul? Okay, okay. So I'm sure you and I have been messaging each other basically through your whole deployment, and you've shared a lot of really cool God moments with me. And maybe share a few of those with us. We'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. One I will share that actually comes at the tail end of um, my ministry. It was towards the last week, knowing that I was going to have to preach my final message. And I really struggled with, do I continue in the series of the godly character series that I've been preaching through, or do I try to, pull it all together and be able to preach one, final strong message in that way? And so when I submitted it to the Lord, He's like, well, I want you to do both. Like, okay, what does that mean, God? So He's like, wait upon me. And about 2 days later, having lunch out in the chapel, and there's this new team of people that were coming through, and this major, she sat down, was eating her lunch there, and she just started to introduce herself. And before long, she says, "Hey, by the way, do you need a worship leader?" And I was like, "Yeah, we just lost our worship leader." It's neat how like the Lord was, closing the door with one person and yet opening the door with another. And so we got to talking more, and she was really sharing about how God had given her this really special devotional that morning, and it was on Joshua 4, where Joshua was leading the people into the promised land through the Jordan River, and how, they parted the waters, and they had to select 12 stones, 12 big rocks, and put them out there into the promised land, them up as a memorial, as a remembrance of all that God had done through that journey of 40 years out in the desert, and all the powerful things that God, all the miracles that had happened, the pillar of fire and smoke during the day, and just the manna that came down, and how they would have to strike a rock and the water would pour out, just the miracle after miracle. And that's when it hit me. Dan, that's your message. So I was able to continue the series on reverence to God, and that being our godly character series, but yet at the same time remembering all the powerful things, the miracles that happen in Afghanistan. And so we actually give out a little rock. I have one here. It has a little cross on it, and we give it out to newcomers that come to the chapel. But this time, I decided to give one out to everybody as a token to remember all the powerful things that God had done throughout my last 9 months, in Afghanistan. It was just one of those interesting moments where God just finds somebody to give me a message to be able to communicate it to the people. And that was a common theme, honestly, throughout my deployment, was how God, when I was pressed up against the wall, and Pastor Aaron, I'm sure you understand this too, when you're like, oh, what am I going to preach on? What am I going to say? And then boom, somebody, speaks to you, and you're like, it just like ding, 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 and the fire going off, and you just, yep, that's exactly what I need to preach on. It's amazing how God does that. And I saw that time and again and again and again, of how the Lord used people, He used circumstances through prayer and so forth to communicate what He wanted me to send across to the people here in Afghanistan. So, um,
Wow.
yeah, there are just so many moments of just watching the Lord do the impossible. Whether it be from uh, when nobody was having services at all in Afghanistan. The Lord gave me a vision, for Easter, to be able to have 5 different stations out in our little garden area, and we were able to get that fully approved, and the 4-star general even showed up to that, and it was a combined service. So we had the Catholic priest there who provided communion for his Catholic people, and we had the Protestants there, and I was able to provide communion there. And then we had the Greek Orthodox who wanted to join in and be able to partake in what they could do. It was just a real holy moment where all Christians were able to come together and worship the Lord. And I don't know if there's ever been an Easter program where you've ever seen something like that,
Mhm.
you know? And that alone was almost a miracle in itself. Uh, and then that prompted the embassy because everything was shut down. And typically, the people from the embassy, because we're connected, the base is connected to the embassy just through, a series of entryway points. And they weren't able to join us anymore, for worship. So the second in command at the embassy called our 4-star and said, "Hey, can your chaplain come over here and offer services?" This was the first time in 47 years that there's ever been a worship service on the embassy, ever. And
Wow.
God paid way where there was no way. The Jesus who was penetrate walls was the same Jesus that penetrated that wall for me to be able to go through there and to have worship services over at the embassy. Unbelievable. I mean, you just can't you can't make this stuff up. You can't write the script. I mean, only a holy God could make something like that happen. 47 years, you know. In fact, just yesterday, the praise team that literally started from nothing, they are amazing artists, and they were able to, you know, lead worship for us over there. And just yesterday, they called me up on Zoom and wanted time for prayer because they miss that affection, that time of worship with me. And it was just so cool to be able to do that with the praise team. And I'm not even part of RS anymore, so God's planted a lot of seeds. But there's another storyline through this whole thing. Again, another God moment. I was working out at CrossFit right before I left for Afghanistan. There's a big thing called the MRF. If you've ever heard about it, the MRF is in honor of a guy last name Murphy, who he was, I guess, killed in Afghanistan. So like every Memorial Day, gyms across the country they do the MRF, and it's this really painful experience. But you run a mile, you do like 100 pull-ups, and it's really painful. And uh, there is this guy that was visiting our gym there in Hampton Roads, and I had never seen him before, so I introduced myself, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm actually just on R&R. I'm a civilian, but I work out in Afghanistan." I'm like, "Oh, really? Where in Afghanistan?" He's like, "Well, in Kabul, Afghan." I'm like, "Really? Where in Kabul?" He's like, "Well, at HQRS." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, wait a minute! I'm deploying there just a little bit." So really interesting how when I did end up coming to the base, he was like the first person I got to really know, and obviously I knew that was God's assignment for me because he was not a believer, and I got to work out with him a lot, spend a lot of time, and unfortunately, he left in like March, and I felt like all of my work that I had poured into him was for naught. I felt like it was just water off a duck's back, and nothing was penetrating his heart. And I was like, God, I did what I could. I tried to open doors and they were closed. God said, "I'm not done yet, Dan." Well, fast forward 3 months. This is a couple weeks ago. I get this random text from this guy Luke, and apparently he had made his way to boot camp because remember, he was a civilian. He decided, you know what, I'm going to join the Air Force. So he goes to boot camp, and he finds out that he has COVID, and they quarantine him, and he has nothing to do, and they gave him his phone, and so he starts checking his messages, and he got a message from me, and he he's like, he texts me and, "Hey, how are you doing, blah blah blah." Next thing you know it, I'm sending him my sermon link, and he is soaking up. He listened to my entire series of the characters. Here's a guy, he was running like the wind anytime I spoke about God, and make fun. God. And now God has a God has him quarantined and is isolated into his own cell, and have nothing to do but listen to my sermon. Oh, it was so funny to watch God help. You know? And so who knows? I mean, what God can do through those planted seeds. And so now what I had tried to have him do is come to one of my services. He never came, but now he's listened to almost all my services. And
Uh-huh.
that's all right. This is so true. Well, early on, like once a month, I'd send out a monthly um, prayergram to my prayer warriors out there across the country, and on that list was this guy named Luke, and they had been praying faithfully for the last 9 months, and so I look forward in the next day or so. I'm going to send out a final update in my last prayergram to at least share what God is doing. You just never know. All we're
Yeah.
called to do is plant the seed, and that really has been my theme this whole deployment: is planting the seed, preparing the soil, and perhaps allow others to reap the harvest, and just sow that seed and allow God to do the rest. And
Mm.
just we're just seeing the fruit of that.
Yeah. So did I see a picture of you and Shane McDonald together?
That's a whole nother thing.
I
Uh, yeah,
got this random picture of two people that I know and respect so much that never crossed each other's path, and now they're both side by side in Afghanistan taking a
yeah.
picture together.
Oh, what a remarkable story. Uh, we got to talking and, find out that he had gone to Crossroads. I'm like, when did you do that? And our paths literally just kind of crossed in the night. And here we are in Afghanistan. And he actually became my worship leader, until COVID hit. And then yeah, he was my worship leader. So that was such a powerful experience to worship with him, and then I kid you not, because he got sent here to where I'm at right now in Bagram, and on his way back to the States, he had to pass through Kabul because he, I think, still has some final business there, and so he was able to join us for his last service with us, and he was able to lead that worship service, and it was a truly holy moment. It was one of those unforgettable times that you'll just keep in the breast of your heart. And yeah,
Jeez, we have two
special.
yellow ribbons hanging in our parking lot for two different guys that have never met each other, and they meet each
Right,
other in Afghanistan. Incredible. And worship together. One leads worship and one preaches in
yeah,
Afghanistan. It's
yeah,
amazing.
I know. I know. When you put it like that, it just blows you away. I mean, there's just so many things, places of how God just weaves this beautiful mosaic story of hope and glory and honor, and it just brings tears to your heart,
Yeah.
just to watch God do his thing. And you just step out of the way and just let him work.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time today. And well, it's today here, it's tonight there. So we're now you're probably ready to go to sleep, and we're keeping you up. So, thank you so much for spending time with us and letting us put together a little video, kind of an update of how things are going in your life. And I look forward to giving you a huge Rona hug when you get back. Elbow.
Our, that's our connection point these days. That's right.
Man, we miss
Yeah.
you so much, and we can't wait to lay our eyes on you when you're back here.
Wow. And the feeling's mutual too. One final word, from this end. Obviously, being a deployed location, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. But knowing that my family back home is being taken care of by just a beautiful, wonderful church. Helps to ease the pain and the sting and the stress and worry. Just know that there's such godly people at Crossroads that have just loved on my wife, loved on my kids. Um, that truly makes a difference. And I pray that God will continue to use Crossroads in that way to minister to the troops and to love on the families and to show grace to them. It speaks volumes to those who are deployed. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
I know that we chose well when we came to Crossroads. It's truly a God thing.
Well, thank you, buddy.
Amen. God bless you guys.
Can't wait to see you soon. Okay?